It's and also to Zoe and everyone at Planet Earth Poetry for the invitation to read tonight. And thanks to all of the open mic readers. You really have quite a special community there, I think, and I appreciated and enjoyed all your work. I'm going to be reading from my book, Salt and Ashes, and I'll begin with some poems about private life and domestic space. Special for Planet Earth Poetry, I thought I'd bring some flowers into my study and my reading space tonight. I also have a Shabbos candle. But of course, the first thing I did was tip over the vase and splash water all over my bookshelf, which had a photo album of photos from my marriage to my late husband. And so so I took it out and was drawing everything off. And the first poem I'm going to read actually references this photo, which is one of our wedding photos in the dress in this. So it's called Gold Mountain Miniature. And the poem, the wedding and the poem are set in, the wedding was in San Francisco where the poem is set, which is referred to as Gold Mountain among the Chinese people who immigrated to the area at that time. Gold Mountain Miniature. 1 month into a pregnancy, she wears a cheongsam cut from beige silk recently brought back from China. From the same trip, she returns with an antique coat, black silk lined in sky blue. She never would have bought it except at his urging because she thought it too beautiful and too costly. There is a word for crust, but why is there no single word in English as there is in French for the white part of the bread, la mie? Like the word lining, blue that shelters the skin from a rough-cut exterior. Was there some clue in the cramped room where she slipped her hands through the sleeves? This would be the garment she would put on to listen to a poem he wrote for her, and he would not be there when she heard it read. Today is my daughter's birthday, and she's very much alive and well and living in Edmonton. This is a poem about her birth, but it's also a reflection on the fact that when we give birth to a life, we also give birth to a death. Stanford Hospital, 1987. This is a serious business, says my husband, a home birth. He will have none of it. The labor coach attempts a simile. It's like running a marathon with a broken foot, though that will come later and bear no resemblance. My father attempts to be helpful. I just hope you don't go crazy after the birth the way your mother did. No, he is sure it was your birth that unhinged her. I am surprised to wake in the night, folding and refolding infant clothes, a nest fabricated from printed cotton squares, wallpaper scenes from the temperate rainforest chosen to soothe in this desert where I shift from room to room. After a week in intensive care, she is fine, but I hold her tightly, run from the hospital like a fugitive, from the unstoppable fact I have given birth to this breath, this child, this life, this death. And this is a poem I like to read this time of year with Passover coming up. And it's a poem I've read in Passover's past at Seder's, remembering the plagues of the Passover story last year on Zoom, and how they are the story of Passover is echoed, and those plagues echoed in our own time. And here we are a year later, still with the story very much part of our lives after many terrible losses, but also perhaps with some hopefulness in our hearts too. Boiling the lamb shank for Passover. I can use that lamb shank, I say at the French restaurant and ask for the leftovers. This is not the place to ask for carryout. Disapproval arrives with the delivery, the shank and foil in a brown paper bag. Pesach still a month off. Remnants are left on the bone. I boil away the remaining flesh. Marrow oozes into the broth. Lamb vapors fill the kitchen. I set the shank aside frozen until the appointed sunset and candle lighting. Herders marked their doors with animal sacrifice to reprieve their own human cargo, but had no mercy for those left behind. Yahweh throws his ultimate weight around, spares not even the firstborn of the slave girl. No need to mention only sons were slaughtered, felled as lambs. Girls didn't matter, not enough wailing. I have a daughter. Keep her well under the Abrahamic radar, safe, excuse me, safe from the plague in that apocryphal tale, the one that finally did the Egyptians in, and I'll boil until day's end. And this poem is about the darker side of motherhood, what Adrienne Rich called the heart of maternal darkness. It's a poem trying to bring some compassion to the struggles and pain of my own mother's very difficult life, and it's a poem about intergenerational trauma. Perhaps if my own life had been cleaner. I pushed her in front of the car. Her death was quick, painless, I don't know. Is death ever painless for being efficient? Perhaps if my own life had been cleaner. One morning, my mother told my brother and me to stay in bed until she came back. She didn't return for 3 days. We comforted each other as best we could, but we were hungry. We ate the only thing in the house, a bottle of ketchup, red like blood, sticky sweet, nourishing. We felt better afterwards. Bread was the consecrated Texas dust. She did come back, didn't say where she'd been. When I asked her, she laughed and said, visiting. What shamed me was the way I scarred. My skin formed ugly welts. Later, I married. Married women didn't have abortions. I killed my girl. It wasn't hard to do. The hard thing was giving birth to her. I'm going to read a poem now that is, I think, about an experience we've all had in the domestic sphere in our private lives, both as guest and host, probably. It's called Unwelcome Guest. Coiled creature, I have traveled a long way to poke you with a stick and milk your fangs. I move around you with familiar ease. The frozen block of venom you offer as host digests me. I want to be a good guest, not to cause pain. Those I love sleep here too. Consumed by the knowledge, death is one thing, life as another. I'm going to read a couple poems now about depression, if it already hasn't been enough of that story for you. I will shift gears after this, but this poem is called Modern Poetry, after these two poems. Anyway. Modern poetry. Easy enough to assign depression to the modern condition, declare the numbing effect of accumulated losses a recent invention. Sheer toil kept the brains of earlier generations from wallowing in affluent torpor, tilling the soil to tend the garden with the memory of being exiled from paradise. The depresso experience. Those people are just rubbing themselves raw for nothing, you said of the habitués at the cafe where I had an espresso each morning, safe there among the too earnest, your love like cigarette smoke at the back of my throat, slightly stale, mildly addictive, quietly lethal. Okay, so I'll read now some poems that connect in one way or another to my life in science and as a scientist. The first one is Singularity. I wandered into that abstract realm that held and would not release me, an arc tangent. The rainbow angle deflects and scatters light, reverberates in the atmosphere. There is a dark side to a rainbow as well as to the moon. A phase transition is a singularity in the complex plane, water to ice, helix to coil, plus to minus. A spring running under thin ice, a collapse of order or an initiation. A woman rising to compose herself over a cup of coffee when the night before she let fall each block of her body. A flip switch that occurs in the magnetic poles every 200,000 years, the shallow eutectic of energy. Thoughts do not follow a mathematical order. They climb their imaginary axis and take root illegally, joke with meaning, appear on the other side of the plane without permission. So recently, I stopped at asking why you are not here anymore.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Maladaptive decadence. The male club wings cannot have it both ways. They cannot evolve simultaneously for the most efficient flight and the most beautiful wing songs. New York Times, May 5th, 2017. High heels when running from the bear, climbing a mountain in a skirt, grizzly attacking the bear-proof garbage can, Quetzal buried in the avocado tree. The clubbed-winged mannequin's solid wing bones, a bomb in the backpack, monster trucks, search for the largest known prime, staying in bed all day while the snow falls, on the bed. Grief and denial, large abstract ideas, a headfirst dive into the truth, most of your DNA that encodes nothing, the biggest of anything, land mammal, sea mammal, dinosaur, swimming on the edge of a vortex beside a black hole, space travel generally. Being the first of anything nearly always guarantees you'll also be the last. This is a poem about Maxwell's demon, named after a famous Scottish scientist from the 19th century, James Clerk Maxwell. He also developed the theoretical equations that describe electromagnetism or light, and made many other important contributions. And this was a thought experiment he had where he postulated this creature that could violate the second law of thermodynamics and spontaneously create order. And so entropy was not spontaneously increasing, but decreasing. So that's the term for that is negentropy, the opposite of entropy, which is a term I use in the poem. So Maxwell's demon. Not a quasi-divine being, but rather a peculiar mode. Maxwell did not use or like the term daemon for this inimical violation, called it only a neat-fingered being. Conservative believer, yet open to new ideas, Maxwell found himself closed off from many benefits of society. Seeking control, he invented the governor, a useful device for taking the train to Cambridge from Edinburgh and back. A young death, a long legacy. First to see particles spin in the rings of Saturn, his equations bind electric and magnetic light cast in partial differentials, spidery fields. Shut the door fast. It's only a thought experiment, negentropy or life, a great unknowing. And this is the poem that was in this year's BC Poetry in Transit. And maybe we'll be back on transit again one of these days this year. No thought, best thought. If there's no self, do thoughts think themselves? Some have asked if water remembers what was dissolved in it. Those interrupted hydrogen bonds reconnect wounded, but no, water doesn't remember. Is memory stored somewhere inside you, or is it just a neural cascade? There's a cost, you know, to erasing information. I'm having trouble with this day. It's Sunday, but without a child, there's not much grace, just crackly interceptions and static transmissions. Grace and mercy drop like the gentle rain, and there is no rain today. Crab bisque, bus tickets, pillows warm from sleep. Gershwin, mercy, mercy me. And I will read the last poem in the book as my last poem for tonight. Ghost poem. Ghosts are what went before. We are ghost catchers. I was at my uncle's shack by a lake full of water moccasins, slithery black snakes with yawning white mouths. Water moccasins are ghosts of the stagnant water. They deliver the strange. I remember visiting Emily Dickinson's house and seeing her white dress, her writing table, and the stacks of poems she sewed together. And she knew, who has not found the heaven below will fail of it above. Ghosts walk among us all the time and tread the fields of heaven. I remember a drink called Je ne regrette rien that had champagne and calvados and lemon. I did not regret drinking it. Songs are living ghosts of the breath of the dead and can be intoxicating. This is a poem about the last time you saw your mother. I remember reading Raymond Queneau while sitting on the floor of an apartment in Toronto. Zazie is still kicking ass in the Paris metro, but someone has placed a bomb there to make more ghosts. I remember a party with my roommates in Berkeley. I went to bed and one of the guests came crashing through the bedroom door, fell on top of me and passed out. Being dead and being unconscious aren't as different as you might imagine. Only in one case, the state is transient and you are still breathing. Ghosts breathe too. In fact, they are breath. I remember singing to my father before he died, the eyes of Texas are upon you all the livelong day, and I've been working on the railroad. I remember numb fingers on the flute, football games and fights and fifths and freezing feet. Wolverines love beaver meat more than anything, but you will never see one because they are ghost animals. Sometimes they leave traces of hair high in the trees. Beavers are benign animals engaged only in large engineering projects, symbols of the country I inhabit. Sometimes I forget to remember, and that is when the trouble begins. You can't have opinions about facts, but you can certainly forget them. Ghosts are the memories you forgot and the people you forgot to remember. There was a day, a very bad day, he said, but only one day. And now, next to the living, ghosts are the ones I love best and sometimes most. Thank you all for listening.
Thank
How
you.
beautiful.
Thank you for your beautiful poetry.
Thank you, Adrienne.
Wow.
Beautiful.
So
Mhm.
exquisite.